edition of Serverless Craic. We're going to continue our series talking about the book, The Value Flywheel Effect, and today we are on chapter 2.2, I think it is. Yeah, so we studied the break chapter 2, which is it's about Wardley Mapping into two parts. So the last part was kind of the start of chapter 2. So I look it up here. Chapter 2, Wardley Mapping. So I mean, the first thing I'll just say is probably 10 years ago we started mapping, wasn't it?
A bit more than that. But yeah, it's about that.
Yeah. One of the questions I always get is, how do you do this in a company? And like, I mean, I think we were all enthusiastic at the start, and you rock into a room full of people and you start mapping and they think you're crazy. Because it does take you a while to get your head around it. It took us a long time, I think, to figure it out. I think we were lucky because we kind of hit each other, and also with other architects, we were open to trying crazy stuff. But I think as we worked through it, there's probably a bunch of stuff that we figured out. So we kind of have some, and sometimes I think that one of the best ways to explain something is to talk about anti-patterns, things that you probably not shouldn't do, but maybe we'll talk through them. But I thought this was a decent list of things that we probably learned along the way that maybe aren't obvious when you see the 101 overview.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yep.
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of these anti-patterns, I'd say it's a good thing, right? How do you do it in a company? Well, one, you try, but then you learn all the ways not to do it. And then through learning all the ways not to do it, you can kind of then sort of craft, well, what are some anti-patterns that I've kind of learned and captured that others could maybe sort of take.
Or another name for this list could be all the stuff that Mike did.
Yeah. I like when I look at the anti-patterns, I'm kind of going, yeah, I could probably remember when I tried some of these. Yeah.
In fairness, I think we all did them. So I'm sure they're right. I'm talking as we get more involved in the Wardley Mapping community, you realize that more people like these are fairly common. So let's get into them. So the first one was gaming the system, we called it. It's when maybe you have an idea in your head, like you kind of, I want these people to do this, so I'll draw a map and I'll make it come out like so.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a collaborative exercise, which means you got to work as a group.
Yeah, and I think if you have experience of mapping and running through the exercises, you can sort of tilt the scales a little bit by nudging people one way or another to come to the outcome you want, and you have to sort of fight against that urge to just get to the input that I want. I get the map that I want out of this. It's really about collaboration and information discovery.
It's like any collaborative exercise, even like event storming or impact mapping. If you like event storming, if you've got like a picture of 4 bounded context in your head and you try and rush through it, somebody should say, hang on a minute, you're going too fast, Yeah, I mean, people can spot when you're jumping ahead.
I mean, what do you think with this one though? No, sometimes you might have an opinion, or it may even kind of be a certain bias. But I don't think that's bad. I think you can go into a mapping session with that, and as long as that drives questions and it's not overly barren on the map.
I think it's being transparent. You should be saying, I think it should be this.
Yeah.
As opposed to sort of secretly drawing it that way and not saying it. You have to state your bias, and that's allow for the challenge. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Being open to challenge is key, right? It's like you want the people to speak up. You don't want to shut down collaboration.
Yeah, very good.
Keep it on.
The next one is mapping by yourself. Like, I don't think this is necessarily bad, but it is a collaborative exercise. Sometimes map by yourself can be a bit of an echo chamber, but at the same time, well, the way I would think of this one, don't be doing a map by yourself and then show the group and say, here's the answer. I think it's okay to sit and map by yourself and like make sense of something as you're working through something, but I wouldn't be sort of doing it in advance and saying, ta-da, here you go. Don't do the work up front.
Don't be presenting it in a PowerPoint deck as if it's completely complete and should not be challenged, right? It's fine to figure stuff out and maybe get a bit more confidence in the mapping process itself by yourself, but you really want to open it up to others so that you get richer feedback and will help you improve it. You don't want to turn up with a map with all these like 50 components on it and go, hey, we're done. Look at my map.
Yeah, I mean, I would map by myself sometimes if to test my understanding of a particular subject matter. You know, like, so what questions would I ask? Or, you know, say you're prepping for a meeting or a conversation, or you're being brought into a scenario that you're not fully, you can maybe do that as a,
Yeah.
you know, what do I understand about this subject matter? And then see what questions you can derive from it and take forward. But you're right, it's not really, you know, it's not really then you're missing out on so much.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair enough, because you might say, I'm going to map something out, and then you'll straight away see your blind spots. I don't know what that's depending on or whatever. Like, that's fair enough. But if the three of us were in a mapping session tomorrow and I landed in, like, ta-da, I have it done for us, I wouldn't, that's not what it is.
No, 100%.
The next one is recreating an architecture diagram. I think this is a common one. I remember we used to see this in threat modeling as well. Now, threat modeling for security is very different than mapping, but it's the same. Threat modeling is like the flow of data, where the map is like, you know, the dependency of components. It's not an architecture diagram.
No.
I think it can be very easy, especially if you're doing the map my stack or map your tech stack out. It can be very easy to sort of try to recreate your entire architecture diagram. You shouldn't do that. It should be a higher level of abstraction. You shouldn't get into the weeds of your.
A good one is like, this depends on that. If you say this calls that, a call is not necessarily a dependency. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you don't be showing all the things that call each other, because you end up with a spider's web.
Yeah.
Next one, this is a very common one, overcomplicating. I've like, this number changes all the time, but I always say, like, you know, if you're starting off a map, try to keep it below like 15 or 20 elements. You know what I mean? If you have like a whole bunch of components on the map, you're probably going too far. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what that magic number is like, but when you run out of space, it should be a smell that you've gone too mad.
That was the only trouble I fell into numerous times when I was starting out. It was just overcomplicating the map, and then you know you need to step back and abstract stuff away, or in some cases have a submap that represents that whole bit of the map that you're trying to show. So yeah, it can be easy just to keep going and adding more dependencies, more components before you know you can't really read the map anymore.
Yeah, I think that's the easy. I think that's the one most people new to mapping fall into, isn't it? There's so much on the list, and it's hard to kind of know what those abstractions are. What would you roll up into, like a high level element? And
well, that's part of experience. I mean, if you're doing a map, say you're about, I don't know, quality or something, you might go like unit testing, developer testing, performance testing, integration testing, you know, acceptance testing. You might just say, let's roll up the testing. Do you know what I mean? And we can do a submap to get into the different types.
Yeah, and that's a real skill. Is you might have a conversation between 3 or 4 people for a good 5 or 10 minutes about all the different interconnectedness and the components and all the different sort of things that make up that thing you're talking about, and somebody can say, let's just call it this. It's having the wherewithal and the experience and the wisdom to basically summarize that whole conversation into one statement or one thing that you can represent on a map. It's something you learn as you go on.
I enjoyed the next one. This happened a lot at the start. The people endlessly asking, what is a component? And you see this with, like, if you start a new map, you draw the axis and somebody goes, right, what do we mean by component? And often software engineers will think of a software component, and that's a good 20 minutes to get past that, where it's like, it's like, I mean, that's just a part of doing any kind of these type of exercises. You need to work out what size your thing is you're dealing with. The big thing to remember is it doesn't really matter. It's not a model. Like, we're not going to type this into the computer and execute it. It's just a drawing. You know what I mean? So just figure it out. You know, you'll find the right level that you're talking at. It could be, you know, it could be something really small, it could be something really large. It just depends on the level of the conversation.
Yeah, the context. I don't know. I always kind of think about, like, I always kind of go back to the Wardley cup of tea example. You know, well, you know, what are the key elements in a cup of tea? Well, there's a cup, there's water, there's heating the water, there's a tea bag. you know, you can kind of, well, those are all that, they all kind of make sense. But then what in that context, if you just roll up the bigger context, it's the same sort of thing. You know, if you're in distributing something, well, I need transport. You don't really get into, oh, I need a truck. Needs a driver, then driver needs petrol. You know, you can like, zoom in on those sorts
Driver needs a hat. Yeah.
where do you roll up? And I think an art form on that.
Another good way to look at this is you're anchoring with the customer.
Mm.
So it's what does the customer want? Now, if the customer is somebody going to a cafe, you know, they just want a cup of tea. That's pretty straightforward.
100%.
I think that it's okay to look at existing maps. We do this all the time. We have tons of, you know, maps that you might reference. Might be the classic cup of tea one, just to have, all right, you know, to put it back in your head again. So it's fine to have examples lying around that you can reference as you're drawing your own map.
Next one's interesting, making everything a map. I mean, often you see, and this is just think probably engineers are guilty of, is you figure out how to do it, you think, ooh, this is cool, and then all of a sudden everything's a Wardley map. So you need to just sort of, you know, don't be forcing it on everyone and don't be going bananas on it.
Yeah.
Use it in the right context.
Yeah, exactly. Like any technique. I mean, you know, cough AI. It's there's always the flavor of the month that everyone wants to jump on. Yeah, this was an interesting one, the second last one now. Showing the map to new people. Now, I very carefully, new people doesn't mean inexperienced, or it doesn't mean, you know, it's just that the three of us were doing a map and we spent a lot of time working on the map and then just said to someone like Sam Wardley, look, this is really cool, and jump straight into it. You need to give the person some time to write, okay, talk me through the narrative, talk me through how did you get here? You can't just, you know, instantly drop someone in the middle of a deep conversation. So it's, you know, don't assume, because we would have spent several hours on a map. You can't assume someone else will pick it up within 5 minutes.
There's a huge amount of shared context and information if we've all worked on something together for maybe a few hours, and then, like you said, just dropping somebody new into that shared conversation, they weren't exposed to that, right? So it's hard for them to get up to speed. So you need to be careful how you introduce some of this stuff to people.
I've been guilty of this one. I've been guilty of this one where you get really excited about your map and you're kind of, you know, you're eager to show everyone about, like, this is why it makes so much sense, and then it just doesn't go the way you expect. You know.
That's something we've learned is sometimes you can take a lot of the learnings from it or some of the narrative and you can summarize it into a Word doc or in PowerPoint slides. And then if they ask, where did you come to this? Then you can have let me show you my working out. And let's walk through the map conversation afterwards.
Well, it's even that. Like we would kind of do those things now, and we would kind of work, we would collaborate, and you'd kind of say, yep, this kind of feels right. You know, we'd talk about our next moves. So how do we progress this? You know, what's our next best action type things? And then you would build a case around it. And even now, I still probably wouldn't go back to the map. It's just you go back to the map when you kind of, if you did want to get a wee bit more detail, and what are those links and dependencies, and then you strengthen your case. And you almost oversimplify strategy sometimes, don't you, through them? So I think for me it's that, you know, like, what you can always kind of form a PowerPoint or a document or a 6-pager or something, but you know, mapping is a nice way to kind of shake out what goes into those things, you know.
And there's a narrative where you want to say, okay, you know, our customer is X, they're looking to, you know, use this service depends on this, and like, so there's a natural flow, and that's where you start off from, and that gets richer as the map gets more mature. And so but when you're starting off again, it's always better to just walk through that narrative again, because, you know, like on the nth iteration you might go, oh, hang on a second, ooh, you could spot something, you know.
Yeah, 100%.
Very good. And then the last one is working in a top-down environment. This is really about psychological safety. You know, if you're the manager of a team and there's a bunch of people, you can't drag them in the room and say, okay, folks, we're mapping, sit there and shut up. You know, that's not how it works. You need to create that safe environment where there's facilitation, you allow challenge, you give space for people to think and ask questions and say stuff. You need to allow people. One thing I think, when I started mapping with Simon Wardley, he's very good at, he'll see the group go down a rabbit hole, and he'll say, well, just let this go. And eventually they'll go down the rabbit hole and you come back up. And maybe it was interesting, maybe it was a waste of time, but you could see sometimes I was thinking maybe he'll just cut this off because we're clearly going down a rabbit hole, but he let it play out, which is good for, creating a good environment and good for discovery as well. Like, so I think you have to be open in the environment, in the room, and not be very sort of forceful and very sort of, top heavy. Like,
I think skill of facilitation is key, especially in larger groups. You got to take the participants with you. You got to take the collaborators with you. And there's good techniques and ways of doing it, but it's just creating a safe environment where everyone is free to have their say and can challenge each other. It's easier said than done sometimes.
Yeah, I think diversity there, like like we talk a wee bit about like psychological safety, but you do have to embrace diversity and respect. People will have different perspectives and different opinions, and that's all really valuable, and that's all right. And as you say, how do you capture that? And I think you mean like we'll probably will get on to tooling and things. How do you support that in remote scenarios? And you can online and things as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You should never have a map forced upon thee or afraid to speak out in those sessions or challenge an opinion. If something doesn't make sense, ask a question, and those questions should be kind of welcomely received, because then that helps. It helps get better outcomes, really, doesn't it? So
I must say, like, Simon is really, really good at this. Like, he's brilliant at facilitating the session. Not because it's sort of his technique. I think he's just naturally a very good facilitator. Like, so it's kind of,
yeah. The facilitation is encouraging people, isn't it? And it's getting that information out of people and getting them to interact. It's not so much telling them what to say or what to think. It's it's getting that out of people and making them comfortable and and capturing it.
It's the Sherpa, guide you which way to go, like, and if you stumble, kind of make sure you're okay, like, but they're not gonna lift you up there.
No.
Or let you fall either. So it's a balance. Okay, so I mean that was our kind of our anti-patterns, which obviously we get into a lot more detail in the book. But I'll probably close it. There's one of the things that I think if you're going to start mapping in your company, sometimes it's a bit daunting to start with a blank canvas. You just draw up your X and Y axis and say, right, let's go. So Ben Mosior from learnwardleymapping.com came up with a Wardley Mapping canvas, which we also describe in the book, which you can go to the site and is open source. But he's got a really nice canvas to walk you through 6 steps of kind of getting going. And I think this is brilliant. I mean, like we've used this loads and use this all the time. This is great to use in a group who are pretty new. If you don't have experienced mappers, you can kind of walk people through the process. Again, we've done this loads. So again, it's laid out like a business model canvas, but the 6 steps. So maybe we'll just hit these very quickly. So first is if you're sitting with, let's do it this way. If you're sitting with a group of people and you want to do a map and using the canvas, you first say, right, step number 1, purpose. What's our purpose? This is not an easy question. Sometimes you can sit in this for a long time. It should just be a sentence, like, what are we trying to do? A sentence, avoiding jargon. The second one is scope. Like, can we narrow the scope? Can we narrow this to maybe a department, a certain smaller area, just to kind of keep it focused?
On this one, it's always fascinating for people to discuss what's out of scope. Yeah. It can be a very, very rich conversation.
Yeah. The third one is users. Who exactly is the user? I always try and say, let's think of someone. Let's think of a name. You know what I mean? If it's like, just try and make it real. If it's the CEO of your company, go, right, so that's the CEO of Twitter, so it's Elon Musk. Is that who you're like, give it an actual person. Try and make it really real and not ambiguous. Try and be as specific as you can.
It is fascinating when you do this with teams and they don't necessarily understand or know who the real user is. That's always very insightful when you're doing this with teams. Yeah. And then they'll build each other. So then number 4 is, what are the user needs? So that user, what does that person need? And that's, you get into, it's not what they want, it's what they need. So effectively what you're doing is you're describing the capability, and then you get into the kind of the value chain. So for that need, what are the things it depends on?
And this is always a hard one, and I always find it's better to keep this super simple. If you have a need, maybe just do 2 or 3 dependencies to get people started. Like, often you see people make the mistake of doing like 10 needs and having like 6 like going crazy. Keep this super simple because you can always extend it later. And then if you think in your mind now you've got a user with a need and maybe 3 or 4 dependencies, now you just take that forward, and the 6th step is the map. You've got your axis with your visibility up the y and the y-axis, and then along x you've got your Genesis custom product utility. You just drop that in the middle, that kind of anchor with the need and a couple of dependencies, and then you're into, okay, let's start placing these. Is this Genesis custom product or utility? You can start placing things, and that's you started then, like, and then you can start adding in more things. So it's a really nice. I mean, we've done this before with stickies.
Yep.
It's quite good. It's nice to do it on Miro or Lucid as well.
But and physical ones, we did this with a lot of post-it notes, a lot of stickies, and that was great. Really, really collaborative. But I think the power of the online collaboration tools is really just taking it to the next level. It's been like Miro and Lucid and others, they're just phenomenally good at this, and it allows you to really get everyone to contribute, right? And it's again, it's good facilitation that's still needed even in the online world. You want to make sure everyone's sort of voice is heard. And when we've done this in the past, we've even time boxed some of these things to try to get people to ideate quickly. You don't want them to just stewing too much on each of the steps. You want to just get through this pretty rapidly, because you don't want people overthinking this sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the start there, Dave, you mentioned how do you do it in organizations. I kind of feel like this is a good way to get it going in organizations, is because it's highly rational, it's structured. I would normally frame these sorts of sessions with what we're trying to, get as an outcome. Like with event storms and stuff like that, we always talk about, Brandon always say, like, with a good event storm, you should leave the room knowing what everyone else knows. But with these sorts of maps, same sort of thing. Like, we're going to organize around this scoped problem, understand our purpose, understand our users, their needs, get a bit of a situational awareness going around our value chain, and then have a conversation about what we want to do.
Yeah.
And that's very powerful when you kind of pull it off. And I think the canvas for me definitely brings a lot of rationale and structure that then brings people in and they get it, Whereas if you kind of just go straight to the map, it can be trickier to get going,
Big leap. Yeah,
it's a
for sure.
big leap.
Probably the step 7 that we do, which we would annotate the map and add maybe some narrative or some takeaways that we would have on maybe the right hand side. Just put a couple of numbers on certain components.
Yeah.
Hey, we've a problem here, or we need to focus on this, or we haven't discussed this properly, and we should come back to this. But just a little bit of takeaways, just in simple terms, that really helps enrich the map.
Step 7, your add observations. Yeah, for sure. So definitely check out, that's Ben Mosior and learnwardleymapping.com. Again, there's lots of brilliant content there. Ben is awesome. He's really, really good at teaching how to map. So definitely check his site out. So that's the crack. That's the end of chapter 2. We'll start chapter 3 next time. Thanks very much. Have a look at serverless.com, our YouTube channel and Twitter, and give us a like or whatever else. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.